come up and talk to us about parliamentary procedure and how things are supposed to be done.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you, Jim.
Time, sir?
5 to 7.
5 to 10. Okay.
5 to 7.
5 to 7.
Or as much time as I really want to take.
Yes.
So when I say the phrase parliamentary procedure to you, what comes to mind?
Robert's Rules of Order.
That's good, that's good, that's good. Panic. Extreme sleepiness. I'm right there with you too. I feel sort of the same way about anything having to do with parliamentary rules of order. Because it sounds dry. It sounds very boring. It's not something that I would actually normally seek out information on. However, I would argue that there's actually another side to this particular topic. Think about how you spend a considerable amount of your time every day. We all spend it in meetings of some sort, and whether it's at work or in our private life or what have you, we spend a ton of times in our meetings. Some people say we spend as much as between 50 and 75% of our time in a meeting of some sort. So meetings are fantastic things, right? People come together, people have discussions, people argue, people have disagreements. It comes to blows occasionally. Well, not that. But you get the gist of it. So we always bring our opinions, our thoughts to a meeting. Okay, other people bring theirs, and it's gonna be a big flaming mess if we can't come up with some way to share our ideas, have other people share their ideas, and then figure out whatever the next thing that we should do to go forward. Right? There has to be something. I personally think body weight should be what determines what ideas get picked to go forward with. But that's just my personal preference on that one. And that's why I won't work with anybody from the Pacific Islands. Because those sumo guys exist. What is it? Not sumo. What is it? What's the
Samoan.
Samoan. Those Samoan guys are huge. You'd be like, hey, what does the Samoan want to do? Because that's what we're going to do. Okay, that's all I say. There's got to be a better way, right? And that's exactly where Robert's Rules of Order come into it. So what's interesting about Robert's Rules of Order is that there was really a guy by the name of Roberts. In fact, the gentleman's name was General Harry M. Roberts. And it was shortly after the Civil War. This general was going from town to town and attending meeting after meeting after meeting. And guess what he found out? They were a flaming disaster. They were really poorly run meetings. And of course, it's after the Civil War, so there's no air conditioning. He didn't have a cell phone he could distract himself with. He had to sit through them, and he had to participate in them, and they were going nowhere. He was wasting his entire life. And he said, well, this, he didn't say, he said, this sucks. But he said it in sort of that cool 1876 sort of, well, I say, this sort of sucks. Right? Oh, I know. And so when he had determined that it was poor, he said, look, gotta do something about it. So he wrote a book. Isn't that what we all do when we're angry and upset? We write a book, right? Well, apparently in 1876, that's exactly what he did. He wrote a book. So he came up and he wrote Robert's Rules of Order, and it turns out it was a pretty good book because it's hung around to today. Now, good news, things have changed, and we're actually on the 10th edition. So there's a lot more rules going on. Now, one of the things that's in his book is how to handle what they call emotion. And I'd like to take just a few moments of your time and talk about emotion. Now, we know what emotion is, right? Have you ever been in a meeting where somebody's made a motion? Yeah, those are sort of those formal meetings, right? Which is interesting, because if there's a meeting where the consequences of what's being discussed is sort of a big deal, they will go all formal-like. If you ever go to, for example, a city council meeting, or anything having to do with politics, you're going to see Robert's Rules of Order being kicked in big time because nobody wants to screw up and make a mistake and have finger pointing coming afterwards, okay? But emotion is when somebody shows up in a meeting and says, hey, look, I've got an idea. I've got a suggestion for what we should do or how we should do something. That's cool. You can have whatever freaking idea you want. I don't really care. Okay, great. And really, I don't care about your idea until you make a motion. Okay, now the way a motion works is actually pretty simple. The person gets recognized by whoever's running the meeting. In the case of a Toastmasters meeting, today it would be Joel. But if somebody showed up and said, hey, I have a motion, they can say, I have a motion. Joel would then call on them. So what you're sort of watching is sort of a ball of authority. It goes from Joel, it goes to the person who has a motion. Joel says, and he'd have to say it this way, what the heck is your emotion? Or, okay, something like that, okay? He can do a little bit more of a twang on it, but that's the gist of it. Yeah. But he has to be recognized. When he does that, then the person stands up and they state their emotion. Now, it's really important the words that they use. Think about it almost as though it was being written down. So they might have, well, I was thinking we could all sort of get together, and then we could, you can't, not that way. You have to be very, very concise about because what's going to happen is people are going to have to talk about your motion. They're going to determine whether or not they agree with it or disagree with it, and eventually it all goes to a vote and stuff like that. If you're all whamsy-pamsy, well, then like sometime we could sort of do this, and no, stop. It's got to be real crystal clear as to exactly what the motion is. Now, when they're done, then the ball of authority goes back to the chair. The chair then presents it to the group. Now, what's interesting is when this happens, the motion is no longer yours. You've surrendered control, and it now goes over to the person who's running the meeting. He puts it out for debate. Now, the very first person who gets to stand up and say anything about the motion is the person who put the motion in. With the thought being that when you submit your motion, you don't go into all the background. Well, I think we should have a car wash on Saturday. Great, so shut up and sit down. That's your motion, right? Okay? Now, Joel has it, he puts it out and says, we're going to talk about whether or not we're going to have a car wash on Saturday. He would then call on you right off the bat. Why should we waste our Saturday having a car wash? And then you get to say, well, because we make money, and we build the community, and like, there's just a ton of dirty cars in the area, all that sort of stuff. Then what Joel's supposed to do is he's supposed to call on people alternating between pros and cons to try and get sort of a balanced view of what everybody thinks. Well, I got this stuff going on Saturday. I think that would be a great idea because I've seen a lot of dirty cars too. Well, I really hate water, so I think that'd be sort of a bad idea. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Got it? Okay. So that's what you said. Now, when everyone's just all talked out, got nothing more to say about the car, Joel then says, great, let's go ahead and take it to a vote. You can do a bunch of different ways. You can have people stand up, you can have them sit down, you can have them do their arms, all this sort of stuff like that. What's interesting about the vote, and this is a little subtlety, sometimes it escapes people, Joel doesn't get to vote. The person who's running the meeting doesn't get to vote unless their vote would change the outcome. Okay? So what's that situation? Well, clearly in the case of a tie. Right? Now here's an interesting thing about a tie when you're conducting a meeting the right way. In a tie situation, 8 for, 8 against, the motion fails. It doesn't pass. Because there weren't enough people for it to become true. But in that particular case, Joel, as the person running the meeting, could say, oh, I vote for it. Or he could vote against it. He could do all sorts of things, but he could basically control whether or not it got implemented or not. If it does agree, if the group agrees to implement it, then it's Joel's responsibility to say, okay, this is what it is. He has to state very clearly what just got approved. And then he also has to talk about what the impact of the group is actually going to be. So a lot of different things. I mean, it's a fairly simple thing. It's getting a change being approved by a group. It's called making a motion. It's pretty simple to do. Just wanted to share that with you. And next time you're in a group setting that has to make a difficult decision, feel free to suggest that you follow Robert's Rules of Order, correct parliamentary procedure, and then go ahead and make a motion. Sure. Do you have that speaker up here now, or should I?
Oh.
It seems what we have here is a failure